Good afternoon or good evening, whatever this is, and welcome everyone. My name is Catherine Burke, and I'm the president of the Brookline Education Foundation. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 2022 Margaret Metzger Fellowship event, Tales from the Classroom. There are always tales from the classroom. This fellowship and tonight's event really, it represents the essence of what the Brookline Education Foundation is. We recognize that teaching is a craft and teachers are professionals, and we're always looking to celebrate the excellence of the Brookline teachers among us. So. Tonight's gathering is the 7th iteration of the Margaret Metzger Fellowship. The fellowship was founded by Margaret's family and her colleagues at Brookline High School in her memory to honor her over 40 years of teaching English to BHS students and teaching and mentoring teachers. Several former students of Margaret's have told me in recent years of the lasting impact that her teaching had on them, that they still think of her all these years later when they are writing something in their professional roles. Yet another example of the lifelong impact a teacher can have on a student. Tonight, we celebrate our 2022 Metzger Fellows. John Weinberger, 4th grade teacher at Lawrence School. Xiaoshui Cao, Mandarin teacher at Driscoll School. Ayala Galton Bassett, Florida Ruffin Ridley School health teacher. Marcy Miller, BHS history teacher. And Michael Lewis, BHS paraprofessional. We would also like to acknowledge their mentor in this effort, Zach Brokenrow, from the BHS SWS English Department, himself a fellow last year. I said to him when he came in, he was so good last year that we put him in charge this year. So thank you, Zach, for stepping into this meaningful and important role. We also welcome members of Margaret's family tonight, as well as her former colleagues. The fellowship and the opportunity it gives to Brookline teachers to reflect and write about their craft would not exist without your vision and generosity. One of the many special things about this program is the close involvement of the Metzger family and friends over the years. From the very beginning, Margaret's wife, Barbara, has been a huge supporter and very much involved. And we've been fortunate to have a number of family members speak about Margaret at this gathering over the years. In addition to honoring Margaret and her legacy, tonight's event is being held in memory of Margaret's daughter, Kat, whom we tragically lost this year. To speak to us about Kat and Margaret, I'm pleased to introduce Kat's father, Keen Metzger.
Thank you. And thank you for honoring Margaret's memory for all these years since her death in 2013. I'm really grateful for all that the Brookline Education Foundation, Barbara Kleeman, Abby Erdman, who worked with Barbara, and the BEF to develop the fellowship, John Andrews, countless participating teachers, and many others that I don't know have done to preserve Margaret's visions. And thank you for allowing our daughter Catherine's death and her memory to be part of the program tonight. She was so close to Margaret and also a child of the Brookline schools. As you may know, she died at age 37 in June after 9 months in the ICU at the Duke Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina, with a pregnancy complication known as HELP syndrome following the birth of her daughter Maggie. Maggie was born at 26 weeks by emergency C-section on September 21st last year. After 2 months in the NICU, she is now thriving and a Catherine mini-me. It's a very long story, but let me start with Margaret. As I recall, Margaret started teaching in Brookline in the fall of 1971 or thereabouts, having taught for several years in another system. She was ecstatic to be accepted to teach here in her mid-20s, and she loved what she found: a strong, organized, and supportive administration, a thoughtful and coordinated curriculum, talented, smart, and committed faculty, many of whom became lifelong friends, parents who wanted their children to learn and took an active part, a diverse student body who wanted to learn. With the exception of a year teaching at Brown, Margaret basically spent her entire career at Brookline High School. There were some down moments. She actually did get a broken leg after being tossed over a chair trying to stop a fight in her classroom. So it wasn't all roses. Margaret was a born teacher on the path to teach since I first met her 65 years ago. She simply loved being in a classroom and thought deeply about teaching and her own career as a teacher. Margaret always thought that there was a better way, that you never stopped with what you had, and she committed herself to improving both teaching and teachers' lives. She wanted teachers to respect themselves as teachers and take pride in their profession. She knew that teaching could be exhausting, but she also wanted it to be energizing to teachers as well as students. Any exhaustion should be accompanied by a sense of accomplishment, not come from facing frustration and tedium. Not surprising, she burst with ideas about teaching, published them, and led workshops about them. But she never copyrighted any of her materials, and not infrequently she found her own ideas and worksheets coming back at her. When asked about this, she simply said, "I don't need to get credit for these, and besides, there are always more ideas." This is a generosity of spirit that Margaret always displayed towards students and fellow teachers. Her goal was the improvement of teaching and the profession, not her own status. If there was a constant in her thinking, I think one of those was to help students become owners of their own education. So we didn't live in Brookline, we've always lived in Cambridge, but we're fortunate that our son Tel, now 48, and then Catherine, after her adoption from Korea, were both able to attend Brookline schools. They both started at the Driscoll School, then led by Carol Schraft, and we could not have been more impressed with the school and the attention it gave both our kids. We would return from parent-teacher nights mind-boggled at all the good and creative things happening in that school and the coordination and talent among teachers. The educational streets truly seemed paved with gold to me. We appreciated at Brookline High School as well the way Catherine was held by teachers and guidance counselors and other staff at every step of her school journey. School was not really her thing, and as one of her teachers wrote me after Catherine's death, Catherine faced the added difficulty of always being in Margaret's intellectual shadow. While Brookline rightly celebrates academics, it shows its real strength in how it comes together for other kinds of students. Catherine's successful journey through Brookline, circuitous though it was sometimes, was a testimony to the strength and impact of the whole system and its commitment to each student. Indeed, what Catherine carried from BHS enabled her to graduate from college as well. Catherine was, however, a gifted athlete with an off-the-chart spatial intelligence. We're grateful not just to the Brookline schools, but the whole community for the sports programs in place and the way that Catherine was encouraged and cheered on from ice mice hockey under Ed Corain at the Lars Anderson rink when she was 6, and years of youth hockey on to the youth baseball program. Eventually, the baseball diamond got too big for her throwing arm, and she focused entirely on hockey, shifting to the girls' team at Brookline High School. She was captain of the team her senior year, league MVP, and Boston Globe All-Scholastic. What we loved most about her playing, though, was her generosity as a player. She had as many assists as goals. She was a team player, kind and respectful to everyone, and very coachable. And once again, the BHS coaches, including Leo Shanahan in her senior year, were superb mentors. She took these leadership traits with her into the Army, which she joined after Margaret died, serving for 6 years in Belgium and Alaska. It was in the Army that she met her husband, who was the reason she ended up in North Carolina. And to the Army, she gave all she had, discharged on 100% disability as a result of her service. So as I said, I've never lived in Brookline, but feel that my family and I have received the best that Brookline has to offer, and we appreciate that you try to give that best to everyone. At this time especially, I'm grateful for what Brookline gave to and did for both Margaret and Catherine, and for your honoring both of their memories tonight with this wonderful group of special teachers. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amy Deutsch. I am a member of the Brookline Education Foundation Board, and I was a lucky person who got to be a student of Margaret Metzger. When I look back on my academic experience at Brookline High School, the very first teacher I think of is Miss Metzger, and I can't call her Margaret, not even 25 years later. I had her in my junior year and again in my senior year, and I was so lucky. Miss Metzger was able to know each of us so well and challenge us to be our best selves. I remember studying the poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke and specifically looking at the idea of the inner life and solitude. Miss Metzger had us all go around the room and share when we each had true solitude, a time to connect and reconnect with our inner selves. In that moment, at the age of 17, I didn't have a good answer. She told me I needed to find it, and I did. What I love about this Metzger Fellowship is that it gives each of these teachers a chance to have that moment of solitude in their lives as teachers, to take a break from the busyness of education, to focus on its deepest meaning, and remember why they do this crucial work. I know that Ms. Metzger would have loved this legacy that you've all helped to create. So with that, it's my deepest pleasure to cede the microphone to Zach Brokenrope, this year's coach.
Thank you all so much for being with us this evening. My name is Zach Brokenrope, and I am an English teacher at Brookline High School, where I teach in SWS. I want to take just a moment to thank the BEF for having us here for the 7th year to honor the memory of Margaret and Kat. I also want to thank John Andrews for trusting me with this event this year. I really appreciate. I hope I didn't screw it up, so let me know. I also just want to thank the Brookline Education Fund for continuing to fund this again every year. I first encountered the name Margaret Metzger when I was a junior at Boston University in their School of Education. I was assigned her essay, Maintaining a Life, in one of my methods class. And I remember getting the essay, seeing it, and my professor saying to me, like, all right, none of you are going to be here when you get out of college. But if you work hard, if you dedicate your life to this profession, and you try your best, maybe you can touch what she does. And that blew me away. I remember reading that essay and hearing about how she held her classes, the culture she created in her classroom, and being in awe of the work that she was able to do every year with kids. It also made me want to teach in Brookline. It seemed like a place that bred innovation, creativity, and allowed its teachers and students to dream big and find the freedom that they need to explore the different parts of their life and what they can be as they get older and grow in their profession and in their lives. Tonight, we honor Margaret's memory by hearing from 5 outstanding educators in this district. Thank you so much for having us here. And with that, I would like to welcome John Weinberger, a 5th grade teacher from Lawrence School, to the stage.
The title of my piece is called The Most Beautiful Duck in the World. And I highly recommend looking up the duck that I mention after I'm done, because it is the most beautiful duck in the world. All right. You just play with kids all day. Oh, and you have the summers off. This was a real conversation that I had with a close friend when I started teaching back in 2007, that I just play with kids all day. So I spent the beginning of my career trying to prove this person wrong. I worked so hard to make sure that everyone knew how hard I was working. I wanted to be excellent. I wanted people to be impressed with how much I was doing. But literally, I wanted someone to walk into my classroom and think, wow, he is excellent. I am so impressed with how much he is doing. So, I do not play with kids all day. But if I'm doing my job right, you won't see how hard I'm really working. It's the opposite of what I thought good teaching was when I started. We, as teachers, have to manage the constant, never-ending issues that come up while appearing calm and gliding along like a figure skater on clean ice. Or like a duck. Yes, I like to imagine myself as a duck. You should try it sometime. I personally see myself as a mandarin duck, in my opinion, the most beautiful duck in the world, but that's just me. You can imagine yourself as a mallard or a wood duck, anything you want. Ducks glide along water, serenely, effortlessly swimming from place to place, all the while their cute little legs and feet are invisible, paddling frantically under the ripples, doing all the work. The smoother that things seem, the more work went into seeming smooth. Being a teacher means being a duck. Teaching is about managing the constant wave of challenges, conferring with one student about their writing while another student is having a nosebleed, while another is laying down underneath their desk, while another is throwing a pencil, and then suddenly the phone rings to let you know that you forgot to post your attendance. We, as ducks/teachers, decide when to keep our decision-making invisible, when it should be underwater, to keep things moving smoothly. We also decide when to show the frantic paddling, when to show that we are not actually ducks, but are humans with real struggles. So, remote learning was an exercise in being a duck, a drowning duck in the wake of a COVID cruise ship. While my Zoom box may have seemed calm, the rest of me was frantically trying to make a million decisions through a computer screen in my living room while my dog was looking at me, annoyed that I was interrupting her nap. I never worked harder than when I taught remotely, although my students never really saw that. One day after I told the students to log out for our lunch break, one Zoom box remained on the screen, but when the camera turned back on, it wasn't Xavier like I expected. It was Xavier's mom. "I just want you to know," she started, "that I had no idea how much teachers have to deal with. It is constant." "Thank you for saying that," I responded, expecting her to simply say thank you back and then log off. But she stayed on. "No, really. I need to tell you that I need you to know how much I notice and appreciate all of the things you do to keep the class moving and learning. There's so many issues that come up and you have such patience." So she saw that I do more than just play with kids all day. Someone noticed. Teaching is a joy, but not every moment is joyful. It can also be scary. Even during stressful situations, we ducks need to appear calm and under control, hiding our feet splashing around under us. Thinking about that day still gives me the shivers of what could have been. I can close my eyes and still hear Carla, my next-door neighbor, screaming from next door. "John, he's choking." Without any more context, I just flung off my plastic face shield and mask as I ran out into the hallway. I was not calm and cool. My little duck legs were paddling in full view. The 9-year-old's face was ashen and his lips were turning blue. He was gasping for air but making no sound. Nothing. Without thinking, I just turned him around and grasped my hands together under his sternum above his belly button, and with one quick thrust with my fists, I immediately felt his body relax as air filled his lungs. His crying turned to coughing and then to measured breaths. With my hands on my thighs, doubled over in shock, I stammered, "Are you all right?" He looked at me, and then he looked at his classmates who were quietly watching a movie during snack, unaware of the commotion in the hallway, and said, "I'm okay. Can I just go back and watch the movie?" I slumped down onto the floor as the nurse ran up the stairs. Even though I couldn't stand at that moment, I knew that my paddling had to go back underwater. I needed to be composed for the kids. So I took some deep breaths, slowly stood up off the floor, and walked back into the classroom, calm and collected on the outside, but jelly on the inside. "All right, kiddos, let's clean up from snack, and then we're going to learn how to add fractions." All day I kept a fake smile on my face, chilled by the thought of what could have been, what could have happened. What could have happened? I still taught kids how to add fractions during math, and I taught a science lesson about plant adaptations. I still tied kids' shoes at recess and made sure kids were taking turns on the swings. No one knew, except Carla, how frenzied and fraught our paddling had to be to appear like nothing was wrong. That day I went home exhausted from pretending and napped. Being a teacher means being a duck, staying cool and calm for our little ducklings while paddling for your life at the same time. So, when I go back in my mind to 2007 and I hear one of my favorite people in the world tell me you just play with kids all day, I think of Xavier's mom noticing me. I think of giving the Heimlich maneuver and then going back into the classroom to teach math. I think of the most beautiful mandarin duck gracefully gliding on top of the water, like a cowboy riding into the sunset. Thank you.
Next, please welcome Xiao Shikao, a Chinese teacher at Driscoll in her 5th year of teaching.
Okay, thank you all for making time to be here to hear our stories. I hope you like my story, but if you don't like it, that's okay. I hope it will make you think, okay? So the title of my essay is called, What Matters More Than Winning? It was 1:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon, and it's the last period of the day. In my Chinese class, students were playing Quizlet Live, a unanimously beloved vocabulary online game, where students compete as teams to identify the matching Chinese words. Students in each group quickly huddled together and started to work right away. The excitement was visible on their bright faces and in their voices as they shouted, "I got this one," or "I don't know it." It's amazing how an element of competitiveness can transform an otherwise boring vocabulary review into an engaging and challenging activity. Not to mention students' responsiveness and the willingness to coordinate and share. A community of learners in the making, I think. Suddenly, I noticed a girl stood up and walked away from her team. Alarmed by her abrupt movement and the visible discomfort on her face, I quickly walked over and asked her what happened. It turned out that she mismatched a word, and her teammate, Ethan, a new transfer student from China, was so bothered that he had quit playing. I picked Ethan here as a pseudonym for a couple reasons. It's not a student's real name. The reason is Ethan is one of the Chinese parents' favorite English name. And because it rhymes with the Chinese phrase 易胜, means easy victory. The girl was even more upset when she saw Ethan's next move. He opened a new tab and started typing into the Google search box, different ways to kill myself. Hearing our conversation, the whole class had stopped and everybody was watching. Some students called out to Ethan, "Hey, you can't do that." Ethan argued back loudly, "Why not?" But slowly closed the Chromebook and put his hands on the desk, then fell silent. I walked over to Ethan and he didn't turn to meet my eyes or say anything. His tense shoulders told me he was feeling defensive, but his hands resting on the desk showed me he was nervous and confused. As an experienced teacher, I could read his body language as well as the voice echoing inside him. My class is upset with me, and my Chinese teacher is going to lecture me. I know what she's going to say, something like being kind and supportive and forgiving. I have heard this so many times that my ears are in danger of growing calluses. 我的耳朵都要起老茧了. That's a Chinese expression. But wait, what did I do wrong? I only want to win. What matters more than winning? I simply confirmed with Ethan that the recounting of the incident was accurate and asked him if he had anything to say, maybe apology. He shook his head almost indignantly. I looked at the clock, only 3 minutes before school dismissal. Time is not on my side, I thought. What should I do? I could use the small window and reinforce the value of being kind. But is Ethan ready to listen? What is the use of my monologue to a deaf ear? I decided to play it down rather than risk escalating the situation. I told Ethan he could rest. No need to rejoin the game. He noticeably relaxed and slumped on the desk, staring at nothing in particular in front. When the clock hit 1:40, Ethan quickly picked up his backpack and darted out of the door. I watched him leaving and felt a pang of sympathy and empathy. I could see my teenage self in Ethan. An examination extraordinaire determined to prevail on every test. And another me in my 20s, a new immigrant to America, who had to learn many aspects of life from the beginning to blend in. Growing up in a small town in China, I was constantly reminded by my parents to excel in school, as that's the only chance to move up and find a good place in big cities. I listened, and with some luck, got accepted into one of the top universities in Beijing. After obtaining my master's degree in Chinese language and literature, I seized a rare opportunity to teach in America and moved here. I got married and have 2 kids, making America my and my children's adopted country. Some people might say, hey, congratulations, you are where you are today because of your success in school. I wouldn't deny that's true, but I also want to share that there was a lot of stress and struggle behind every success. And I sometimes seriously doubt if it was worth it. For example, I still have bad dreams about the school tests and wake up in a panic because I couldn't solve a physics problem. It's true, it happened again last week. Yeah. So, determined not to let my own children repeat my experience, I encourage them to do well in school, but don't scrutinize their report cards. You got a B? Okay, try to do better next time. It's about all I will say. It's been decades since I left my hometown, and China is thousands miles away. But I know my parenting approaches would be criticized as not responsible or neglecting in Chinese society. Some things never change, no matter the time and the distance. Similar to the American dream, China has its own dream, the examination system called 科举. Ancient governments implemented this as an effective way to select capable candidates for official jobs, a fair opportunity for ordinary people to advance socially and economically in a hierarchical society. This examination system has been around for over 1,000 years and gained new meaning and new life in modern China. Chinese society is so wrecked by corruption and connections that examination system might be one of the few places not contaminated by power and money. Imagine an examination as an arena where ordinary people have a chance to compete in a fair way and attain a better future. In addition, the examination system has also received renewed focus due to China's one-child policy. This notorious policy may have slowed population growth, but the damage caused will take several generations to repair and to restore. In a sense, the amount of attention and resources poured onto the only child can be overwhelming, in some cases suffocating. Chinese parents are often willing to pay for as many extracurricular courses as the child's schedule allows, and to make any family sacrifices needed, including separation within the family. Parents are so obsessed with the children's academic success that they tend to overlook other important perspectives in life. For example, how to accept mistakes, especially other people's mistakes. Which brings me back to Ethan. Born in Beijing, Ethan went to an expensive bilingual school and spoke fluent English. With this solid language foundation, Ethan and his mom moved to America after finishing elementary school, but his dad stayed behind in China, working to provide. Far from family and with limited English, Ethan's mom focused on his academic success more than anything. Ethan must be aware of the sacrifice his family made and feel the pressure to do well in school. But how can he find a middle ground between winning and being a team player? Because of the language barrier, but more importantly, because of the discrepancy between two value systems in China and America, I'm not sure how much Ethan's mom understands or is willing to comprehend how frequently her child is caught in this conflict. In 2011, when Amy Chua's memoir, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, was published, it reverberated across the overseas Chinese American community. Some Chinese people criticized Chua for going to extremes and demonizing Chinese parents for the world audience. However, I know some of the parenting details would resonate with many people, especially when they recall how their own parents pushed them to work harder. For example, when Chua's father, a well-established US college professor, was invited to her 8th grade award ceremony, he was disappointed because Chua had come in second rather than the first place. On the way home, he said to her, "Never, never disgrace me like that again." Back to Ethan's story. Some of you might be wondering, why didn't I seize that teachable moment and give a lesson and values? Those are all insightful suggestions, but I don't know how feasible they are, because honestly, I doubt how much I would be able to accomplish in such a small window and on such short notice, even if I tried. All I did was to follow my instinct and play it down. I did not confront Ethan because I didn't want to embarrass him further when he was on the edge of hostility. I chose to wait and allow him some space that might lead to trust between us and willingness to listen and reflect in the future. When that time comes, I will tell him, if you can't lose, then don't play. But if you don't play, then you can't win. However, there are things that matter more than winning. Thank you.
Please welcome Ayala Galton-Bassett, who's currently in her 20th year of teaching. Ayala currently teaches 7th and 8th grade health at Florida Rough and Ridley.
I know I'm biased, but I happen to believe that my class, 7th and 8th grade health, is the most important class that a student will take, possibly ever. And since I've been teaching some iteration of health class since 2002, I've gotten pretty darn good at, well, parts of it. Thankfully, I come from a huge baseball family. Our boys both play, my husband and I both coach, and during baseball season, our lives are consumed by it. I constantly remind myself that even the best major league players only get a hit once out of every 3 at-bats. So if they can go 1 for 3 and be paid millions for it, I figure it's okay to leave some classes feeling like I stink at my job and I struck out in every class. After all, I'm not being paid millions. So what is health class? I promise it's not kids carrying around flour sacks pretending they're being responsible for a baby. Health class is all about learning facts and information related to wellness, practicing tons of skills, such as assertive communication and refusal skills, and integrating those facts and skills with your own personal values and beliefs in order to make lifelong choices that will benefit your wellness. Basically, it boils down to critical thinking and mindfulness. I talk about continuums all the time in health class. Evaluating the risk level of our choices is an important life skill. During our mental health unit, students make a continuum of coping mechanisms, which lists unhealthy and healthy ways to cope with stress. And then they highlight 15 to 20 on the healthier half of the continuum that they'll utilize when they're stressed. We don't all need to sing Kumbaya and do yoga and eat carrots. As long as students take home the message that it's a healthier choice to binge Netflix and eat an entire bag of M&Ms rather than use cocaine as a way to deal with their emotions, I feel like I've done my job well. We'll call that batting 250. Continuing to analyze risky behaviors. Crossing the street inherently has some level of risk. Students agree that crossing with your head down, nose in your phone, is riskier than looking both ways and having your eyes on the road around you. Jaywalking is illegal. So is smoking and underage drinking and having sex at age 15. But should we not do these things because they are illegal? Or should we not do these things or delay doing them because it's healthier? One of the first things we do in health class after the usual start of the year icebreakers is to create a set of rights and responsibilities for each class. This is important even if students have made them in every other class already this year and have been creating them each year since pre-K. Because as I said, health class is special. We have to become adept at talking about sensitive and sometimes uncomfortable subjects. Here are 4 of the norms we usually come up with. Raise your hand, don't call out, be nice, no personal questions, confidentiality. So here's the important and unexpected part. Sometimes rules are worth breaking. Students put on their critical thinking caps and ponder this question: what motivates and influences the choices we make? So we spend time in class creating norms, and then sometimes we push back on them and throw them out, because sometimes that's the healthier choice. I'll share some examples. So number 1, raise your hand, don't call out. I myself am a quick thinker and often a blurter. I'd like to think that I blurt respectfully and am aware of airspace and sharing speaking time, but I blurt nonetheless. Is it fair for me to have norms for the students that I can't or don't want to follow myself? Plus, some hilarious and memorable teaching moments have come from students blurting things out, like the time I asked Section 8.3 why they should procure more than 1 condom, demonstrating that sometimes one breaks. So if they only have 1 and something goes wrong, then what? A girl in the back of the room blurted out, "Then you're screwed." And I quipped back, "Or not, as the case may be." They erupted in laughter. Later, as they filed out of class, I stood at the door to say goodbye and wish them each a good rest of their day. Many of them thanked me and said, "This was the best class ever." And this best class ever would never have happened without the blurting. 2, be nice. On the surface, it's a lovely idea. Being nice seems like the obvious thing. I mean, what's not to like about people being nice? However, one of my most successful lessons from last school year was based on pushing back against this idea to always be nice. My goal, after all, is to teach students to be assertive and to stand up for themselves and what they believe in. Occasionally, that might look like being nice, but other times, being nice might conflict with the healthier choice. Students brainstormed a list of times when being nice doesn't cut it, and they came up with situations involving peer pressure, bullying, mental health, substance use, and consent. All situations where being assertive is healthier than being nice. I strive to model consent every day by allowing students to consent to read aloud or say no, consent to share their ideas verbally in discussions or say no. Research shows that if students have the chance to practice refusal skills and assertive communication skills in the classroom, no matter how cheesy the role play might be, and even if it feels really fake to say out loud in class, no, I don't want to get drunk at the party because I'm on the soccer team. Or, nope, I can't go on a date with you. My aunt works on a submarine and she only surfaces above water every 10 years and we're visiting with her this weekend. If they've had the chance to say those words out loud, no matter how much it makes them uncomfortable or how silly they feel, they are more likely to be able to retrieve those assertive refusals in the real world. Through that lesson, students took home the message that it's healthy to stand up for yourself, even if they sacrifice being nice in the process. They learned it is more important to be assertive, especially around issues of consent, than it is to be nice. 3, no personal questions. This is an important rule in health class because students aren't allowed to ask each other if they take antidepressants, if they vaped or smoked marijuana, gotten drunk, or had sex. And they aren't allowed to ask me these kinds of questions either. I'm very adept at swooping in and pausing the conversation with a, "That's a personal question, so we won't answer," and redirecting the flow of the discussion. I give reminders when students share personal stories that it's safer to start with, "I know someone who," so they aren't outing their older sibling about the time they got drunk at a party and threw up in the hallway, or how their older sibling has a stash of condoms near their bed. I was amused to pull this question out of the anonymous question box. Which is the best type of sex? Anal, oral, or lesbian? Since sharing my personal preferences for sex is not something I want, nor am I allowed to teach, I can't answer that personal question. But it's a funny and important question that deserves an answer. So I follow our classroom rule and don't answer the personal question. Instead, I circumvent it and still provide the students with factual information. I remind students that best is a value statement, and every individual gets to figure out what best means for them. So what does best sex mean to an individual? When middle school students brainstorm about possible consequences for sex, they immediately know unplanned pregnancy and STIs goes on the con list. They also know that pleasure in feeling close to someone can go on the pro list. We dig deeper and discuss the potential emotional pros and cons of being in a sexual relationship. Inside our classroom bin of protection methods are condoms, dental dams, a diaphragm, sample birth control pills, a model of an IUD. But there's no protection method that I can show students how to use that will protect their emotional selves from heartbreak. I joke with them that I wish there was a condom for the heart, but there isn't. So we brainstorm ways to make sexual relationships, or any relationship for that matter, healthier. They know well my favorite C words. No need to blush. They are communication and consent. So in the end, the best kind of sex is going to be the kind where there's communication and consent. Whether that's anal, oral, or lesbian, that's for you to decide. 4, confidentiality. Kind of like Vegas, what happens in health class stays in health class. Confidentiality is complicated and nuanced. It's important for everyone to know that what we learn in health class is not a secret. If it were, I think that would be incredibly worrisome and unhealthy. I always tell students to share about what we're learning and practicing in health class because studies show that the efficacy of the curriculum increases when they talk to their families and friends about what we're learning, as that helps them integrate the content and skills with their own values. This means we get to share the what without the who. By what, I always joke with students to make sure to go home and say what we've been discussing or role-playing, not what we've been doing. Because they burst into my room some days and say, ooh, are we going to be doing drugs today? And I respond, we're going to be learning about drugs today. Because we get to share the what without the who, this means I can tell you a couple more funny stories from health class without naming any names. One time when we were reviewing the penis and related parts, someone said, I thought a prostate was a woman who makes money through sex. Notice I didn't expose who said that line, thus following our rule about classroom confidentiality. And years ago, I made a photocopying snafu on the STI packets. The original was double-sided, but somehow I only copied the front pages. So students were missing half of the information. Trying to figure out who was missing what and who needed which of the info sheets was complicated. The conversation went something like this. Me, wait, who has herpes? Oh, laughter. Me, who has the reading about herpes? Me, who needs HPV? Oh, laughter. Me, who needs the sheet about HPV? One of my favorite ways to end class, if the timing works, is to have students practice leaving an unhealthy situation by walking out the door. All year, students practice various refusal role plays. They have different options of way to refuse. There's the whole just say no, no, or suggest something else. No, don't want to have sex, but let's make out instead. Or give an excuse, no, my coach will kick me off the team. Or another way to refuse is to simply walk away. And when I can time them practicing walking away, just as class is about to be dismissed, especially if it's right before lunch, then I know they'll remember that skill forever. And I know I've hit it out of the park. What motivates and influences the choices we make? Sometimes we do things out of obligation, or because it's morally the right thing to do, or the healthiest choice, and even sometimes because it's the fun thing to do. Hopefully coming to this event tonight checked off all of those boxes for you.
Our next speaker, Mike Lewis, began working at Brookline High School as a special education para in 2019. Mike then transitioned to a role in SWS where he assisted with emotional support, and currently, Mike leads our security team at the high school and has been transformative in reimagining how we can promote social emotional learning as part of our larger security plan. It's worth noting that while I was writing this afternoon, one of the kids came in, asked what I was doing, and when I said I was writing about Mike, she told me that I should describe him as her personal hype man. So with that, Mike Lewis.
All right. I thought doing security at a high school was tough. This takes the cake right here. All right. So, another day of waking up before my alarm goes off. As I slowly shuffle to the bathroom for my morning routine, I dread what the day has in store for me. Although I love my job, sometimes it can be stressful. Either way, I just can't get enough. As I climb up the mountain of steps to SWS, which is school within a school, I'm greeted by laughter, excitement, and smiling faces. Sitting in Dan's office, Dan Bresman, coordinator of SWS, where we usually would discuss the plans for the day and if there are any students that he would need me to pay close attention to. While finishing up our conversation, a student approaches the doorway, and Dan, with excitement in his voice, says, "Mike, I have someone I want you to meet. This is Tanya." Dan knows I've worked with some of the most distressed and escalated kids and have been able to produce positive results. I would be lying if at first I didn't say, how the hell am I going to pull this off? In my head. So the student, with all due respect, seemed like they were in a really bad headspace. Her clothes was extremely baggy and torn, and her hair was bright red with hair clips all over it. I introduced myself and let her know that if Dan sent her my way, it's because she needs a little extra support. Our first interaction consisted of me trying to make conversation because she was too timid to talk. I don't blame her. I don't blame her. I know most people see me and doubt that I can help because of my appearance, but I'm always happy to prove those people wrong. I've dealt with that doubt my entire life. I'm from a neighborhood in Roxbury, Eggleston Square to be exact, and I was in the MECO program from elementary school all the way to high school. I had no preconceived feelings about it because as a child, I loved the thought of going to a new school and experiencing something new. Boy, was I in for a surprise. I came from a setting where everyone looked like me and I fit in to a setting where I stood out drastically. This is where the doubt started. I noticed that the other students were picking up the lessons quickly and finishing their work on time, if not earlier, where I needed extra help and would often finish last. As a kid, this didn't really bother me, but it wasn't until I got to high school where it started to come to light. I had to sit in countless parent-teacher conferences where my defiance was the leading topic. Whenever something academic was brought up, they would just say, he's capable of doing the work, he just doesn't do it. And there were also times where they would say, we don't know if we can help him, and there may be something wrong with him. It was at this point I started to question myself, is there really something wrong with me? And if so, why me? The fact that these professionals couldn't tell me or my parents what was going on, I must be really screwed up. I carried that doubt with me my entire life, sometimes going above and beyond the requirements just to prove that I'm capable, if not more capable than others. Let's see, I had to prove to them I'm not an idiot. It wasn't until I started working at BHS I found out I had a learning disability. Sorry. I printed this out a little too small, so. There we go. Sorry. Thank you. Watch out for someone's having an emergency. Security. I have a learning disability. With that being said, I don't ever want a student to feel the level of discouragement that I did because they feel like someone can't help them or they have an undeserving mindset. I don't want Tanya to go through what I went through mentally. After the initial meeting, it took us a week of sitting in a room together to finally get her to talk. It was because I said something that she could relate to. I have anxiety. Once I told her that, I also struggled with mental health. That level of relatability opened the floodgate of conversation. Finding out we're more alike than she thought. Finding out we're more alike than she thought, she started to open up to me. When I found out all that she endured, I instantly wanted to help her by all means. But helping wasn't easy. I'm not the best when it comes to patience, and mine was definitely tested. Let's see. There were days where we would check in, and there were days we wouldn't check in at all because she was good, and there were days where we spent the whole day together. Part of her regression was avoiding me because she felt she couldn't be helped. Wow, I know exactly that. I know what that feeling is. I can't let another student go through what I did. My persistence wouldn't allow her to be neglected or unsupported any further. One day she finally told me she was afraid to get help because she didn't know if she could do it or deserve it. I then told her sometimes you have to go through uncomfortable situations so you can live comfortably in life. That was our motto. Whenever I felt she was regressing, I would just keep repeating, this is all part of the process. A few months in, I'm noticing changes. Her absences have slowed down, she was attending class and getting her work done more often. There were a few slight bumps in the road, but overall she was doing better. Although she gave off this harder shell image, she genuinely just wanted to change and feel valued. At this point, she didn't hesitate to share anything with me. She told me about this friend who she adored but felt like she was being taken advantage of by her. She would tell me stories of when they would hang out and it involved doing everything the friend liked and didn't pay any attention to Tanya's interests. She would often use Tanya's insecurities and triggers against her. I had to let her know that's not her friend. The fact that someone can try to keep you in a bad space to uplift themselves is not a positive friend quality. I swear after that, she hit the ground running. At first, she was nervous because that had been her only friend for a long time, and I had to let her know, Tanya, there are plenty of people that want to be your friend. You just have to meet them. Let's see here. A few weeks later, she showed up with a bunch of new friends, and a crucial piece of advice I gave her was sometimes the only obstacle in your way is yourself. I'm extremely proud of Tanya. Not only was she doing better academically, but visibly you could see she was doing better. Even though our meetings started to get shorter and shorter, I was happy to see that we got her out of the darkness that clouded her in the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, I had to thank her. She taught me something that I was never able to master on my own, my patience. The road to success wasn't easy, and my patience was tested a lot. We both stuck it out, though. We both understood that we needed to change, and we used each other to get there. Moving forward, I will not limit myself. Just like Tanya, I still doubt myself, but just like her, I have me to help.
And our last speaker tonight is a teacher at Brookline High School for 22 years. She spent her entire career with us. She's an institution in and of herself. My friend, my mentor, Marcy Miller.
I just want to say before I start, I've changed every name in this story except one with this former student's parents' permission who are here tonight, and I'm so honored that you came. He was eating a chocolate chip cookie and it smelled fabulous. Where did you get that? I asked. The spa, he said. His name was Peter. It was the year 2000. I was new and I was young. Peter was in my homeroom as well as my new 9th grade class. During the first couple weeks, as I was attempting to try this thing called teaching, a colleague in another department stopped me as I was entering the classroom. You know that kid you have, Peter? He has cystic fibrosis. Suddenly, I was 11 years old on my childhood living room couch watching the made-for-TV movie Alex, the Life of a Child, and all I could remember was that CF patients rarely lived into adulthood, and my inner self pleaded not to get close to this kid. Peter was one of the friendliest students I've ever had. He would stay after class and engage me in routine small talk almost every day. During homeroom, when I had to read general boring school announcements and take attendance, he would park himself in a chair right next to me. Unintentionally, we got to know each other well. Occasionally, he would miss school for extended periods of time as he was going through his lung cleaning process at Children's Hospital. By his junior year, Peter was once again on my roster. I had miraculously gotten a full-time job at Brookline since they hadn't figured out that I didn't quite know what I was doing yet. Was this accidental, or did his guidance counselor intentionally place him there? This time, my connection with Peter was inevitable. During his first extended stay that year in the hospital, I was asked to pass along materials so that he could keep up with his schoolwork. It was an unintentional reflex when I blurted out, "Can he have visitors?" I was 26 years old. I didn't have any obligations barring me from spending my extra time with this kid. After a quick stop at the Brookline Spa to grab his favorite chocolate chip cookies, I drove to Children's, for what I thought would be a quick visit. Peter and I became close. My visits to the hospital became more frequent, and I'm not sure if I continued to go for Peter or for me. We talked about everything going on in his life, his girlfriends, his new puppy, colleges, and his friends. Upon graduation, he wrote me the kindest card, while in it suggesting that I marry his guidance counselor, since we were the only 2 adults from Brookline High who visited him the most. And then Peter graduated. After years in my classroom, he may have learned no history at all. As I said, I wasn't really that good back then, but I learned. I learned how sometimes the relationship is more important than the content. He may not remember the presidents of the United States, but he kept in touch and he stayed connected. On occasion, we would have lunch when he came home from the University of Connecticut. Seeing him reminded me of my difficult first year teaching. He would subtly and silently remind me why I became a teacher, why I wanted to work with teenagers. His name was Garrett. I was older, with 21 years of teaching under my belt. He was constantly coming late to class, rarely turned in completed work, and he was failing. He did not engage in small talk. He was no Peter. I yelled at him every day he was late. One day at the end of class, after a particularly aggressive chastisement for his tardiness, I asked him if he was okay. He quickly answered yes and kept going. And then he stopped, slowly turned around and said, "But I really appreciate you asking." I almost didn't ask. I almost let him walk away. It wasn't an elaborate gesture, but it was easy. Had I asked him in October rather than May, would he have been as close to failure? Her name was Jamie. It was year 22 for me. It took every ounce of my being to not find her unbelievably annoying. It was really hard to hide, and I'm afraid that she sensed it. She would come to class 10 or 15 minutes late every single day, swinging the door open so violently as if she were Kramer entering Seinfeld's apartment. I would be conducting my really well-prepared lesson as she interrupted me, greeting at least 5 students spread across the room with a fist pump. I would ask her to sit down, all the while forcing myself to stay calm as she took her seat and turned her attention to her cell phone. And I didn't stop her. It kept her quiet, briefly. Her grades were mediocre, enough to pass, but definitely lacked any effort. About halfway through the school year, she was failing. It was an easy class, a multi-level senior elective. And when it came time for our first meeting to address her failing grade, she sat in a chair in her dean's office, slumped against the back of the seat, her head down. She was not the enthusiastic nor the annoyingly energetic student who drove me crazy every day. She was ashamed. She was failing, but in reality, I was the failure. That day in the dean's office, I overcompensated for my lack of attention to her needs. "You can do this," I cheered. "You're smart. We can make a schedule." Garrett narrowly passed for the year. Jamie closed out the year with a C, but it was a struggle. Our connections were not effortless, and they were late. They were connections, but for these two students, I could have and should have done better. Tragically, Peter passed away. After a car accident. And it has taken time for me to fully appreciate what Peter gave me. He became a symbol representing all of the Peters who would come later. Relationship before curriculum. "Do you want to come over and have dinner with my family?" I asked Derek, knowing he had very weak familial relationships in his life. "I think that would be really weird, Miss Miller." We speed through content, and if you take a brief bathroom break, you might miss an entire decade of history, but it doesn't really matter. We show up, we show our humanity, we reveal our vulnerability. That is what matters. To all of the Peters, Garretts, and Jamies, thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for trusting me, and thank you for pushing me to do better. And to all of the Derek's, even if it's weird, I won't stop asking.
Before we end tonight, I'd like to say thank you once again to all of our honorees for spending a week with me this summer writing these essays. I know it's hard to give up time in the summer away from your families and your friends, but I think I speak on all of us here tonight saying we appreciate you and the stories that you shared. So one more round of applause. I'd also like to thank Liz Ascoli for being a person who is always tireless in her work for this event and making it happen every year. Thank you for trusting me to do this. And again, the BEF is something that's special. You don't have it in every district, and it makes a place like Brookline a wonderful place to work and a special place to work. So thank you for continuing to support it as parents, as teachers, and as a community. Thank you for making Brookline the best job I've ever had and something that I can't wait to spend the next 40 years of my life doing as well. Thank you. Thank you, and please get home safe. Thank you.